if you are good enough. That's the only barrier. Dungeons. So obviously I mentioned a new dungeon coming in 7.2. We are incredibly happy with how central dungeon gameplay has been to Legion so far. With the array of dungeon content that we've had, with the Mythic Keystone system that really provides an alternate parallel progression to gearing if you're not, you have a smaller group that's not necessarily up for raiding but wants challenging content. So we want to keep building upon that. So we're doing a few things on that front in 7.2. First off, we want to make sure that dungeons stay relevant, right? When we move on and we have Nighthold gear and 7.2 is coming out, what's the point of running a heroic dungeon at that point? What's the point of running even a regular mythic dungeon that drops 840 gear if we're all in much better stuff than that? So when 7.2 comes out, we're actually going to increase across the board the difficulty of heroic and mythic dungeons as well as their rewards across the board. We're going to basically introduce the Tomb of Sargeras dungeon in heroic and mythic, and that will have the tuning and reward that makes sense for a dungeon in that place, and everything else is going to be moved up right alongside it, so that they all stay relevant, as opposed to the problem we often run into in the past, where, let's say in 4.1, the Troll dungeons come out, and you don't have any reason to run the original dungeons. What that also, of course, means is that the whole Mythic Keystone system also gets renormalized and bumped up on top of that. So rather than being irrelevant, a Mythic 3 or Mythic 4 will go back to being challenging and relevant for the intended audience, alongside the Tomb of Sargeras raid in 7.2. Karazhan. Now, initially, it felt like, man, 9 bosses or 8 bosses, depending on how you're viewing it in Karazhan, that's really tough to have as one dungeon experience without a weekly lockout. In 7.2, we're going to break this up into upper and lower sections that will be available as 4-boss Mythic Keystone runs, but they'll also be queuable random heroics. Also at the same time, we're going to add queuable heroic versions of Court of Stars and Archway. So that if you are the heroic dungeon player, if you're not someone who jumps into match-made or to organize non-match-made mythic dungeons, you basically have 5 new dungeons coming your way for your playstyle in patch 7.2. Oh yeah, speaking of Mythic Keystones, one of the great things about this is that it's an expandable system. We can keep adding new variables, new ways of interacting with the system. So expect some new affixes coming your way. For those of you in the crowd who are some hardcore progression raiders, if you've done Mythic Il'gynoth and you know how the bloods work, imagine if every mob in the dungeon were an Il'gynoth blood. Just imagine. It's great. What, why don't you guys think it's great? I give up. Okay, so 7.2, pretty large patch for Legion. Outdoor questing zone, 9-boss raid, 4-boss dungeon, Legion assaults, PvP brawls, artifact challenges with new traits, dungeon updates, flight in the Broken Isles, and new class mounts, and more. When is this coming? No, actually soon TM, sorry. But right after 7.15 PTR is done, again, apologies to those of you who hate content, but get used to there often, almost always being something on the PTR. The second something comes down, we're going to have a new thing to put back up, because the content train marches on, and that's how it goes. So 7.1, 7.15, 7.2, there'll of course be a 7.25 after that. So yeah, I mean, at the end of 7.2, we will have delved into the depths of the Tomb of Sargeras. We will have vanquished the Avatar of Sargeras again. We will have stopped Kil'jaeden himself. We will have used the Pillars of Creation to seal off the Legion's invasion of Azeroth. Feels a lot like that's where this story should come to an end. I mean, in a lot of ways, Icecrown Citadel is kind of like the Tomb of Sargeras of Wrath, and that's where that ended. So, where else is there to go after this? Well, if you've been listening to Illidan, if you've been listening to and learning about the nature of the Legion, you know that they're likely to be back. We may win a brief respite. We may save ourselves for a day or two, for even a year or two. But what will come after that? They'll just be back for more. Where else could we go in our search for the end of the Legion. If we want to stop the Legion, if we want to truly win peace for Azeroth, we're going to need to look beyond the land around us, beyond the Broken Isles, beyond Azeroth itself, to the skies. We are going to need to go to Argus. Now, we're going to have a whole lot more to talk about when it comes to this in the future, but there's almost nothing that I can say that would not be a tremendous spoiler right now. But suffice it to say, this story and our journey is far from over. We have an epic tale, an epic story, and an epic amount of content prepared coming your way. Thank you so much for joining us for the ride. Hang on tight, because it's going to be a great one.